Oh, to our old mate Richard Marles. Now, as you know, we have been on his case, and rightly so, for the past few weeks. Apparently he's a little bit frustrated at our reporting. Oh, diddums. And our reporting is largely informed by the writings of Samantha Maiden, who I hope stays on this story. We hope she shows the same vim and vigour for this story that she has of previous ones, which basically points out that this bloke loves a private jet. And despite the fact that he's the Defence Minister and he says national security, there is no national security reason why he was on board a private plane paid for by the taxpayers that flew from Brisbane, where the Labor Party National Conference was being held, to Sydney to watch the Matildas, to go back to Brisbane for the Labor Party conference. Completely political. Nothing to do with his job as the Defence Minister or the Deputy Prime Minister, because you see the Prime Minister was already there. But unlike all of the other Matildas matches, when they won, he didn't join them by the side of the field when they lost. Geez, I wonder why. But remember, this was just the tip of the iceberg, including, of course, that he had made many, many flights to and from Avalon Airport. Now, you would think that the commercially available flights from Avalon to Sydney, the commercial flights from Avalon to Brisbane, the commercial flights from Avalon to big parts of the rest of the country would be the ones that the Defence Minister would use. But no, he's decided, because he lives closer to Avalon Airport than Tullamarine Airport, where, don't worry, he wouldn't have to drive, and it wouldn't be in an SUV that somebody may let the tyres down on. Of course, he's in a com car, which means you would pay if he flew commercial, you would pay if he had to drive to the commercial airport, but you have to pay more when he drives to the Avalon airfield, because, you see, he just likes the private jet because it'll get him there faster. Now, apparently, we are talking about millions of dollars worth of air travel that have been racked up by the minister. Now, he will say that most of that is to do with the defence portfolio. OK, I'll cut him some slack. But remember what happened when Bronwyn Bishop spent $5,000 of taxpayers' money on a helicopter to go to a political fundraiser. Now, the rules, just like for Richard Marles, says that technically that was OK. But the pub test was quickly invoked. And, of course, she didn't just have to pay the money back. She ended up paying with her job as the Speaker, because travel routes used to be a thing. But now travel routes, because it's Labor in charge, apparently is not a thing, despite the fact that the cost of that private jet was 3 times more, plus $1,000, than the helicopter that caused all that trouble for Bronwyn Bishop. Well, there actually was some coverage in the media, but not much this weekend. In fact, most television has taken the attitude towards this story that, does anyone really care? Cue the tumbleweeds, no real coverage, no real conversation, even in the places that talk all day about politics, where the smallest of process stories can be stretched out for weeks and weeks and weeks. Who knew what, who knew when? Well, who knew what and who knew when about the private flight for the Deputy Prime Minister to fly from Brisbane, party activity, to football match, not part of his job, back to party activity in Brisbane? I repeat, travel routes used to be a thing that politicians were afraid of. But you see, Labor people think that they can basically just get through it. There won't be the same outrage machine, because, you see, The Guardian won't blow up about it all day, every day, which means social media won't get that cranky about it. They'll be able to strong-arm a few people at the ABC that it's not a story, it's just a News Corp thing. It's just a news.com.au and Sky News thing. Oh, Paul Murray at night, who cares? Well, there was at least somebody who was willing to kind of ask, but not really that seriously about it, and that was on the Today Show on Friday, when the Deputy Prime Minister was appearing with the Leader of the Opposition, who we hope asked some questions about this, some pointed questions about this, in Parliament when it resumes later this week. Here, in part, was the incredible interrogation of the Minister, who says, "Nothing to see here, nothing to see."
A lot of people travel on those flights, so my direct component is a fraction of the number that's been reported. Everywhere I have gone, everything I have done has been on behalf of the Australian people and the duties that I do in that regard. Okay. And I stand by every one of the flights that I've taken. This has been kicked along over the course of the week by a dodgy spreadsheet produced in Peter's office, which is about smear and fear, because Peter has literally nothing else to say.
Richard, why don't you just produce the manifests, the flight schedules? I'm mindful of security, but $7,500 a day, you can probably just explain how many flights you've taken. That has nothing to do with security. Just give us the schedule.
Well, you know, to be honest, where we're at now, my preference would be to have all of that out there because that would make things much clearer. But there is a genuine security issue here.
Do you like the dodge? Carlos, it's not about the manifest. And him saying, oh, everything's to do with the national interest. So then why aren't you flying commercial when there are commercial flights from Avalon, the closest airport to you, or the ones that will actually connect to even more places around the country, which is a further hour down the road? Why does this have to cost that much? And if his defence now is, oh, it's not really $16,000, there were 6 other people, so divide by 6 and that's how much, and even then it doesn't really count because all of it was to do with my job. Sorry, which part of his job as the Deputy Prime Minister is it necessary to fly from the party political activities of Brisbane, where the national conference was being held, to fly to Sydney to watch a football game? Oh, because I wanted to support them. I wanted to show that I was with them. What, there are no televisions in Brisbane? You couldn't go to the live site? Of course, there is much more to run on this, and I hope that the opposition has found out ways to ask the questions. Because if his defence is going to be, well, the number's not as big as it seems, well then, OK, let's make it $1,000. Repay it. Because there is no reason whatsoever that he needed to fly on a private jet paid for by the taxpayer when the flights from Brisbane to Sydney could be as low as less than $100. Even the most fancy, flexy flight that throws in a glass of champagne is still under $1,000 for those flights. So let's see how this week goes. Will he survive the week? You bet. Why? Because the media is not interested in applying the same standards to the Deputy Prime Minister that they would to a Liberal Deputy Prime Minister. For example, let's imagine as Defence Minister, Peter Dutton flew from a Liberal Party conference in Brisbane to a football match in Sydney to go back to a Liberal Party conference in Brisbane. What do you reckon Opposition Leader Albo and Deputy Opposition Leader Richard Marles would have done with that story? You reckon it would have come and gone in a couple of days, been limited to only one website that seems to care about it? I think not. Now, for their part, the Greens are saying that they don't like what happened here and they will raise the matter if they can in Parliament. Now, of course, the problem for the Greens is that if they want to ask questions about this via the Senate, well, they're just going to get the person representing the minister. This action all has to be in the lower house. And we know that there are Greens MPs in the lower house. Will they have the balls to ask any questions about this or pretend it needs to be dealt with in the place where Richard Marles doesn't actually work? The Senate. One of their senators was on telly today.
Well, I was pretty astounded when the figure came up at $3.6 million, and that's for the Defence Minister, not for the Prime Minister, for the Defence Minister. Now, there are reasons why the Defence Minister may have some special purpose flights, may have to go to Washington for a particular negotiation, may have to go visit some military bases. But $3.6 million? I mean, he's only been in office for a bit over 12 months. We were shocked by the figure, but then we were also astounded that they're continuing to refuse to say where he went. And we have this rubbish security reason that somehow if they tell us where the Defence Minister went 12 months ago, it's going to show some pattern of life. And that pattern of life will somehow risk the security of the Defence Minister. It's likely to show a pattern of flights between Geelong and Canberra.
My prediction here is that someone for the past week inside the Defence Minister's office's job has been to go back and try and find a similar flight that Peter Dutton took. Because when he was the Defence Minister, therefore scandal on him, scandal on me, scandal, well, it cancels out scandal. I thought we had a new politics, a new accountable and transparent politics. But just like Katie Gallagher, who has been caught lying to the Senate, well, if you're a Labor person, eventually, if you just lie long enough, the clock will run out. That will probably be what happens with Richard Marles, but he should have an uncomfortable couple of days, and the people who are paid to talk about politics professionally, now that the story is dangling in front of them with the simplicity of party business in Brisbane, football in Sydney, back to party business in Brisbane, private jet, not any of the commercial opportunities were taken, well, maybe they might cover it. Maybe.